What does it mean to thrive as human beings on this planet?
The word that keeps coming up is connection. And for me, it's an inner connection. It's a connection to oneself. It is so easy right now to get swept out of oneself, at least for me personally. When I feel deeply connected to me, I'm able to live my purpose. And I know that purpose can feel like this big, heavy word and it stresses people out. But my definition of purpose is simply living my authentic self. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the show. I have something totally different for you today, and I hope you love it. So instead of me interviewing somebody else, today I'm sharing an interview that somebody else did with me. Specifically, that person is Renee Moorefield, CEO of WisdomWorks, who you might remember from earlier this season when I interviewed her on the science of thriving. Renee is globally recognized for her incredible work with leaders around the world, and I was gobsmacked. I think that's the right word, gobsmacked, when she asked me to be part of her leadership conversation series. In this conversation, we dive into my background as a food writer and recipe developer, including my highs and my lows. And I share my thoughts on what it means for me personally to thrive. We explore paradigms of reciprocity versus extraction and how those can be applied to the wider web of our lives. And I share my tips for cooking and eating in a way that fosters rich connection, not necessarily with others, but with ourselves. This is such a personal conversation in many ways. I open up about my purpose, not just here on Mind, Body, Spirit, Food, but really in my life purpose. It's a big question. And near the end of the conversation, Renee asked me how I view myself. And I found myself getting teary-eyed. It's such an interesting question. It's fascinating for me to look back, like when I was in my 20s, and how I defined success back then compared to how I define success today. And it's drastically different. Success isn't a place I'm trying to get to. Instead, it's the how. It's the journey. And you all are part of that journey. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here. Thank you so much for listening. Definitely hop over to the newsletter this week as I include links to some of the things we talk about in this conversation. I really, really hope you enjoy. Let's go to it.
Hi, my name is Renee Moorefield. I am CEO of WisdomWorks, a company that advances thriving leadership in organizations around the world. I have been doing interviews with leaders around the world, and I had such a good pleasure of talking with Nikki Sizemore, a leading voice in the food industry. Nikki is the creator of the Mind, Body, Spirit, Food platform. You will not want to miss it, and I hope you really enjoy my conversation with her as well. She talks about the power of inner connection, how connecting with ourselves, especially during these turbulent times, is such an important avenue to our well-being. I was also moved by her comments about the power of shifting from an extraction mindset to one of mutual reciprocity. It's so important for us, especially when we are stressed and feel contracted, to do what we can to reach out to others. And when we are reaching out in that reciprocal way, it does so much for ourselves. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Nikki, I am more than thrilled that you agreed to do this interview with me about thriving leadership. We've been doing a series of interviews with leaders across the world, leaders of all industries, all geographies, all ages, and it's been really fascinating to hear what people have to say about what it means to thrive in our world today, what it means to be the kind of leader that is an active invitation to the thriving of others. So thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
Thank you so much for having me. It is an honor.
Awesome. And I've got a few questions I want to ask you. These are questions that I'm asking every single person I interview, knowing that we'll go wherever the interview takes us. So
Wonderful.
it's going to be pretty organic. But to start, just for the people who are watching this video or listening to the audio, I'm curious if you could give us a little bit of your background up until now in your current role as leader of Mind, Body, Spirit Food.
Sure. So I have been in the food industry for over 20 years. Went to culinary school in my young 20s. And since then, I have worked in so many different capacities in the food world. From never in restaurant kitchens. I don't think I have the competitive edge to handle that energy. I was never an interest. So I went into media. I've worked in test kitchens. I've done video production, a lot of food styling. I've done marketing and PR for food companies. I mean, teaching cooking classes, really all over the board. It was almost like when I look back on the puzzle pieces, I kind of had to dip my toes into everything, and everything makes sense. Everything that I have done or that I did really makes sense for what I'm doing now. So I would say in I think it was 2016, I wrote my first cookbook, and that kind of switched trajectories for me. I also had kids at the time, and eventually I had to whittle down what I was doing. It was too much. I was spread way too thin. So I put my focus around that time into my blog called From Scratch Fast. And that's when I decided to make the blog, which was always just a place I would like throw content just because I felt like I needed to have a web presence. But that's where I turned that into a business. And it was great. I learned so much, and I really made it into what I was hoping to. I made it into a thriving business. And at the peak of that experience, I burned out, massive burnout, to the point where I got really inexplicably sick. No one could really figure out what was going on. I was exhausted, and it took a little bit of inner investigating, but not that much, because I think, of course, my soul knew what was going on. The blog, while I had made it into a success, it ceased to become an expression of who I was. I was at the point where the blog world, for those of you who are not like into the blog world, for a blog to make money, you have to have visitors to the blog. So you've advertisements, blogging is built on ads. Long story short, you need to be able to show up in search terms. Like if people were to Google flatbread pizza or whatever the search term is, you want your flatbread pizza to show up. So what happened is I was writing content for search engines. You know, I joke at that point, I was writing content for Google, and it became such a competitive industry. And it still is. But I lost my voice. And so thankfully, since I had built this business that was generating income without active involvement, I decided to take a summer off. And I've never taken that much time off from work in my entire life. I've worked since I was a teenager. And that in and of itself was a very scary thing to do. But I went inward and realized the blog just wasn't the trajectory that I was meant to go on. And I'm really grateful, because part of me just wanted to burn the whole thing down. And there was another part of me, kind of a wiser part of me, that said, no, there's value here. Let's just pivot and let's see where we go. And ironically, about a year earlier, my husband and I were on the couch, and he said something like mind, body, spirit, food. And I immediately opened my computer and I made a document with just those words. And I knew that somehow that just resonated with me in such a deep way. And so during this summer, when I took the time off, this was just when Substack had been going, but not in the food world. Now there's a ton of food writers on Substack, but I had this idea. I was like, wait, maybe I should do a newsletter called Mind, Body, Spirit, Food. And that just organically developed. I decided to do a podcast as well, kind of on a whim. My husband's a music producer, so he had a microphone, and I was like, okay, let's just do the podcast. And I found my voice. I found my calling with this newsletter. And it's really wonderful that I didn't burn the blog down, because the blog still was the cornerstone of my business, and it still exists today. And now I have, help keep maintaining it, and I'm going back in and re-adding my voice to make it more me. So it's kind of come full circle at this point. But that kind of in a nutshell is my story. And I'd have to say mind, body, spirit, food is, yes, it's recipes and it's all that fun stuff, but it goes a lot deeper. It's about how we nourish all parts of ourselves. And so I feel like that's my purpose. And I feel really blessed that I get to live that out within my career.
I love that you took us through not just the linear career path that, someone might take a person through, but that you really talked about some big highs and then a crash. Crash, because I think a lot of people can really relate to that. I know I can personally in my career at WisdomWorks. I've had a similar very big high and then crash about 15 years ago. So I can really relate to that. And it really links to the first question that I want to ask you, which is in this age of disruption and change, where all the research and I think people's experience would say there is kind of societal inflammation. I mean, we have this chronic inflammation at a collective level, and then people are experiencing that personally as well. What does it mean to thrive as human beings on this planet? Because we're in a really interesting, I'm one who believes we've always had uncertainty. We've always been living in uncertainty.
Sure.
But we definitely have uncertainty in our faces in a way, not just individually, but collectively in a way that we might not have experienced before in human history. So what does it mean to thrive in this period of our lives as people?
I love this question so much. And of course, I think every answer is going to be individual. To me, what it means to thrive, the word that keeps coming up is connection. And for me, it's an inner connection. It's a connection to oneself. It is so easy right now to get swept out of oneself. I mean, we are like bombarded with distractions all over the place. And what happens is when we're swept out of ourselves, we lose our inner power. We lose that grounding, that sense of awe and wonder and delight. At least for me personally, when I feel deeply connected to me, I'm able to live my purpose. And I know that purpose can feel like this big, heavy word and it stresses people out. But my definition of purpose is simply living my authentic self. So it's not what I'm doing as much as it is like me expressing the authentic Nikki, nameless human soul inside of me. That is my purpose. And I can't do that when I'm in distraction mode or when I'm, out of myself. So inner connection is how I find thriving. And the beauty of that also is when we're so deeply connected to ourselves, I found that we can authentically connect to not just other people, but to the world at large. Like as a cook, when I am in that place of deep connection, I can connect to the food I'm eating in a whole different way. And in that goes even further, I can then connect maybe the farmers who grew that food and certainly to the earth that supported and raised the seedlings or whatever it is. So that inner connection fosters this little web of outer connection. But thriving for me has to start there.
Yeah. When you say this outer connection, the word that keeps just humming in me is generosity. It's like a natural generosity.
Love that. Yes.
About when we are really generous within and we're connected with who we are. Actually are. That is really, really beautiful. So in the space of connection, I like that connection to self, connection to others, connection to the larger world. In that space of connection, what kinds of leadership have you noticed, ways of leading, have you noticed emerging in the planet that excite you, that are centered on a thriving people and a thriving planet? And that may be, by the way, some ways of leading from your own experience, ones that you've been practicing yourself.
This is such an interesting question. And I think I'm going to answer it in the scope of the food world because that's my space. But I think this is applicable to all industries. But where I see thriving happening, so in the past, in our industrialized food world, we raised food, grew food for humans to thrive at the cost of everything else. So it was a very extractive way of producing food where we were destroying the earth and a lot of other things, not to mention like the workers' health and all of these things in the process of creating food. Where I see thriving now is in practices, systems, businesses where reciprocity is the structure. So instead of extraction, it's a regenerative reciprocity where we're not just producing for us, but we're producing food, yes, for us, but in a way that's also beneficial to the land and beneficial to the people who are working the land and to the workers bringing us food. This is not mainstream in the food industry, unfortunately. But I do think if we're going to survive, I really do, then we have to return to this. And this is not anything new. This is what Indigenous cultures, this is how Indigenous cultures lived. It's within this system of reciprocity. And I think that extends to even businesses, even within myself, looking at that. And within reciprocity, if we think about the land, we live in cycles. So again, going back to food, there are periods where the earth is really lush and growing and producing. And then there's winter where things are fallow and things are regenerating and things are quiet. And it's taken me a long time within my own business to understand that I too have cycles like that. And when I honor those cycles, I can show up so much brighter. I think I can live my purpose more brightly, authentically, more joyfully by following the cycles within myself and allowing my business to follow those cycles as well. So I'm not sure if I answered your question. I kind of went all over the place.
Totally did. Well, there's not a right answer to any of these questions. So I should have said that at the beginning. There's no right answer to any of these questions. This is just a really an exploration. And I loved your answer. And what it kind of sparked in me is one of the principles when we're working with different organizations and leaders, one of the principles that we talk about a lot that takes a while to land sometimes for people is it's not about just the results you want, it's about how you get there.
Oh, yeah.
The how matters as much as the results.
Yeah.
To me, you're describing that so beautifully, which is the how is about the building in systems of reciprocity.
Yeah.
That's the how for the result, which is feeding nutritious food, feeding people, thriving people and a thriving planet. So for you, what are the qualities and skills required for that way of thinking? Because what you're describing here is a different paradigm and really a different worldview. I have some personal experience with that because I'm part of I've talked about this. I'm part of a little regenerative farm about a mile from my house. And so much of what you're describing is built into this little farm and the way that we interact with each other to really support what's being produced, farm and where it goes and all of that. What are the qualities and skills required to lead in such a way that you're come from, the place, the orientation that you come from is one of mutual reciprocity?
I think that there has to be a capacity for stillness. I think there has to be a dedication, perhaps, to, again, it goes back to the first question. In order to find that connection with ourselves, where we are living our purpose, and I do think we all have a purpose, we have to be willing to get quiet enough to go inward, which I can tell you from firsthand experience is often the hardest and the scariest thing to do. But also, it's one of the most enriching things we can do is to go inward and make friends with that inner self and to start there, to heal, to care, to nourish, to tend gently to ourselves. Because then, like you said, it just ripples out. Then we end up doing that for others without it being an effort or without it being some sort of projection. It's just an effortless way of being because we've done it from ourselves and we're so rooted in that inward space. So I do think that requires us to step away and to get quiet. And it doesn't mean like we have to go live in a cave or spend hours meditating. I think these are all like within my work in the food, within mind, body, spirit, food. I love that quote you said it about the how and not the what. I actually have a quote in my book. It's from Edward S.B. Brown. And I'm going to butcher this quote, but it's essentially that it's not about what we do, it's how we do it. We have the power to change our lives by how we do the things we do, not necessarily by what we do. So I take this cooking for me, making a meal, making a lunch. It's not about what you're making, really. I mean, that comes into play later, but it's about the how. How are you going about doing this? Before we got onto our call, I'm feeling really depleted today. I'm feeling exhausted. It's been a week, like WEEK, capital letters week. And I was making lunch and it was like, okay, I was in a mode, go mode. I'm just going to throw a bunch of stuff on a plate and eat. And I had to pause. I had to take a deep breath. I had to set an intention to let this meal nourish me, nourish my emotions, nourish my spirit, let it go deeper than just the physical. And I didn't make anything different than what I was going to make. It was literally leftovers that I assembled in a bowl and reheated. But I sat quietly, and I can promise you that that meal feels physically like it did something to me, but certainly mentally and spiritually, it did way more than me just throwing stuff in a bowl. And now I'm able to show up for this call or show up for my team in a way that is rooted and grounded and loving, because I feel like I just gave that to myself and therefore it kind of just can extend outward instead of showing up really depleted and tired, which is where I was headed. So it takes a little bit of a disruptor to be like, wait, what do I need? What do I need right now? And we're not often taught to listen to that. We're taught to give and to, and that's beautiful. But I think it has to start with that quiet inward reflection so that we can nourish ourselves in a way that allows us to thrive effortlessly.
That is really beautiful. And I love the example that you gave of, again, your own life and your own leadership and how you were trying to practice the exact qualities that you are teaching through all of your work, about nourishing yourself. What are ways that we can nourish ourselves? As you were talking, it made me think, I wonder, can we build, I believe we can we build work processes, workflows that are actually nourishing? I certainly, in my own life and work, there's some tasks that I need to do, but just because I need to do them. They're either things that are needed for taxes, or they're needed because of a legal requirement, or there's some sort of compliance that has to happen. There's a large part of the work, and even that part of the work, how I show up to it makes all the difference.
Yeah.
That, who I'm bringing to that task, even the compliance tasks, makes all the difference. So you're reminding me, because, when we first started this call, I also said, I'm having a capital D-A-Y. I'm having a day. I could literally feel myself getting into a spin around the day and mentally saying, yeah, this isn't that big of a deal, but emotionally not there.
Yeah.
Caught in my day. So, to me, there's such power in that pause that you're mentioning of the noticing where we are, what state we're in, that active pause, which really takes a second, doing whatever action, whether it's a shift in thinking, whether it's as you said, holding an intention, whatever it is, whether it's a breath, whether it's taking, for me, it's a short walk, movement in, that makes all the difference. That helps you create a shift.
Yeah.
In who is showing up for that task.
Yes.
Really, really makes a difference.
I have a process. This is a process for cooking, but I'll share it because I think there's ways that we can extend it beyond the kitchen. I talk about this in my Mind, Body, Spirit, Food newsletter and in my forthcoming book, but it's about ways of bringing intention into the kitchen. Because again, it's less about the what and more about the how. So the process of practice, and that sounds again like this heavy thing, practice, but it's like supposed to be this thing that flows and ebbs and comes and goes and that you can make your own. But it's best, BESTE. And this is what I do when I go to pick up my chef's knife. The B stands for breathe. Like just take a few deep breaths. I used to dive into making dinner after finishing a workday, shuffling the kids, and then I dive into making dinner and I never stopped to breathe. And it became this race to the finish line. And I always felt like the out of shape jogger, even though I'm a trained chef and this is what I do for a living. No, I was like, wait, there's something off. And just that practice of taking a few deep breaths to like calm my nervous system, bring me into the present moment, had a massive shift on my relationship to cooking. And then engage your senses. And this is about getting embodied, like getting in your body. I mean, at least for cooking, the whole joy of it is that it's a sensual activity and it allows us to get out of the mind to enjoy our senses. And so feel, touch, taste, move, get in your body, and then set an intention. And this is more about how you want to feel during the activity of cooking, or I guess whatever it is how do you want to feel? And sometimes my intention will be so silly. It'll be like, I want to focus on my sense of touch. And it's fascinating to see what happens as I'm cooking and my mind will wander and I'll come back to that. And all of a sudden, like I'm having so much fun, like feeling things tearing into kale leaves or dusting flour, or I want to focus on beauty. I will look for beauty is another one of my favorites, because then all of a sudden I start to see beauty everywhere. Things that had seemed so mundane then become just gorgeous, like the way the light will hit my countertop. I'll be present for that. And then the 2 T's at the end are thank your body and thank the food you're eating. But I think that's just could be extended to any kind of gratitude practice, because I don't know about you, but like when I'm in a state of gratitude, something softens. I'm open to awe and wonder and joy, and feeding myself becomes much more pleasurable. And I'm then able to extend that gratitude to others as well. And when we sit at the table, extend that gratitude to my family and to people who grow the food. So that's just a little BESTT. I just feel like that could be extended outside of the kitchen as, again, like this pattern disruptor of how do we get out of the go, 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 do, this has to be done. Can we pause and reset ourselves and then go into the action from a different perspective?
Yeah, I love, and I use the same language in my own work, of pattern disruption. I love the idea of pattern disruption because it gives us such agency.
Yeah.
Make the changes that we want to make. If we want to have certain experiences of thriving, experiences of awe, experiences of wonder, experiences of joy, something that we've been talking about, we have the ability not to wait for the world to serve it up to us, which that also happens too. You take a trip to a culture, you go to the Grand Canyon, you go to the mountains, you go to the beach, and it's hard not to feel awe.
Yeah.
Because the world has really served it up. The world is so marvelous. Although even in those places, we can be so disengaged and disconnected that we can miss the marvel. And yet on the flip side, we can create this state within ourselves so that whatever we're doing, even the mundane, becomes sacred. The real path of deep well-being. And as I'm saying this, I totally agree. This is a practice. We are in a world, I started this conversation by saying it seems like we're feeling a lot of collective inflammation.
Yeah.
Chronic inflammation. We are in a world that feels to people faster than ever, more stressful than ever,
Yeah.
connected technically, but more disconnected emotionally and socially. And this is a recipe for high levels of stress.
Yeah.
So what you and I are essentially talking about beyond leadership of organizations is leadership in our lives. How do we interrupt that pattern in our own lives and in the ways that we be, the way I say work, but it's really the ways we be.
Yeah. Yeah.
So out of our being, we can do tasks, but from a very different place.
Yes.
A more regenerative, more well-resourced place in ourselves. And it's a practice. If much of the outer world of our, media messages and news programs and political disruptions and all of that are reinforcing go, 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 or you can't keep up, or you got to keep up, or should, whatever those are, then it truly is, I think, a revolutionary act.
Yeah.
Say, I'm disrupting this pattern at least a moment. And by the way, I'm probably going to dip back in to the societal norms, and then I'm going to disrupt it again. So it's building a muscle.
I talk a lot in my work about sovereignty, which is funny people are like, I thought you were just talking about food, but really my mission goes that deep. Like I want people to find personal sovereignty, freedom. And really that is freedom from everything you're talking about, freedom from the ways we are so conditioned so that we have the agency to create and live the lives we want to live and not be funneled through a system. And within the food world, this is where diet culture comes in. We are so conditioned around food and to what's good and to what's bad and what bodies are acceptable and what bodies are not acceptable. And I want everyone to feel freedom around food, freedom in how they feed their own very unique, beautiful body. So it goes that far, but I think that that's the goal. And that as a leader to feel that for yourself, then you can help the people that you employ to find that sense of sovereignty for themselves so that their magic can bubble to the surface.
When I hear you say the word freedom, I'm assuming, but I'm going to check, you're talking about a deep inner freedom.
A deep inner freedom. Yes. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah. Beautiful. That's beautiful. So I know this was not originally a question that I had sent to you on my list. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
What are you noticing in the food world as far as how well is this message landing for people? Is it resonating? Just what are you noticing as far as it's in the food world?
It's starting to shift. I think we're starting to understand that there is a place for everything and every body. In every human body, every body shape, every body size. There is a massive backlash against diet culture, which is beautiful. I also think that people are starting to see that food is very important, not just in the sense that we all have to eat to survive, but that it is connected to everything. It is connected to the land, to the earth. It's connected to climate change. It's connected to politics. And so to get involved in the food system is very important. It's a bit of a catch-22 because growing food in a way that is regenerative is more expensive than the current industrialized model where food is the government subsidizes so much of what we grow to the detriment of the earth and to the workers. And so this has to switch. That change has to happen so high from a really top level structural system. And I don't know if that's going to happen within this administration. In fact, I can tell you 100% that's not going to happen in this administration. But I do think there's things that we can do individually to find that sense of freedom for ourselves in micro little ways. And this can be in, maybe using your intuition to guide your food choices. Maybe it's in going to the farmer's market and connecting with the people who grow your food, or maybe starting a little herb garden in your windowsill, learning about food, getting our hands into it. So we build that connection. I think it's going to have to start, that grassroots, like kitchen to kitchen to kitchen to kitchen. That's where we're going to see change in the next couple of years, not from that big structural system, which does need to change as well. Like that has to happen, but that can feel very overwhelming and out of our control.
Yeah, I think you're so right. And that institutional change is, it's institutions that have been there for decades. So it's probably going to be decades of shift.
Yeah.
So it's where do we have, you said sovereignty, where do we have agency to actually make some shifts in our own family system, in our own neighborhood, in our own personal lives? And we all have possibilities.
Yeah.
In our relationship with food, in what we eat, and how we eat, and who we bring to that.
Yeah.
So I see you as such a strong, powerful, well-being leader. I really do. We've known each other for a very long time.
I know.
I've been tracking your work for a very long time now. I see you as such a powerful well-being leader and a voice to be heard. And I'm wondering how you see yourself in the changes that need to happen in our world.
I've had to detach myself from, this might make me emotional. I have had to detach myself from any projection put upon me, or what I thought my life was going to look like, or what I thought success was going to look like. I've had to completely redefine success for myself. And it's not what I thought it was going to be when I was 22. Success looks like very different value system for me. And it's been a process of actually understanding my values and letting those dictate quote unquote success. So I think for me, how I see myself is just a work in progress, trying to be an example for others, to invite others to go within themselves and find the light, the joy, the stillness, the thriving, the support that's within all of us. That to me is success. Even if, just one person hears that message and feels that sense of agency to do this for themselves. That's it. And that, I'm raising kids too. And it's like, can I do it totally differently? Like you said, this is a different system from what you or I grew up with. And it can feel pretty daunting to do things in an entirely new way. But if I can switch that to and it's so exciting, then that's when the fires in me get lit. And that's when I think I'm at my best. It's like, I can do this. Let's try it. Let's experiment. Let's explore. And that's also, how I talk about cooking. It's not about perfect roast chicken. It's about the process of getting there. Try, taste, explore, play. And I guess that's what I want my life to look like as well. So I don't know about an end result. I can't go there. I just know about this process of continuing to unpeel the layers, and hopefully in doing so to help others do the same for themselves.
Wait, we're back to the question of how, noticing the how and noticing and being really on the journey.
Yeah.
Rather than being so focused on the whatever the end point is.
Right.
That end point for most people is defined by the outer world. So for all of us who care about thriving people and a thriving planet and thriving organizations and thriving food and really have a deep value for this capacity to thrive, to really be on the journey ourselves.
And not to be afraid of change. I was so afraid of change for so many years. And it's now I think I finally, knock on wood, because this is a practice, but I finally understand that change is the only constant in our lives, and things are going to change. Our values will change, our beliefs will change. And when we can just flow with that, like you were saying when we started this call, you had to flow with what was showing up today. When I can flow with life in that way, flow with what is showing up in my day, flow with what is showing up in my year, and really trusting that it's happening for me. Even the hard stuff is causing me to grow and expand in ways I perhaps can't see in this moment. there is such beauty within that. And that is leadership for me. Like, I don't want leaders that are dogmatic and stuck. I want leaders that are willing to grow and change and evolve. And I think that's really how we are going to, create a thriving world.
Yeah. I'm going to end there because that was such a beautiful, there's not much more I can say. That was sort of a mic drop. Thank you so much for everything you're doing and for the gift you are just by your presence and all the things that you're putting out. They are enlightening and life enhancing in the best of ways for me personally. And I really thank you.
Thank you so much. And likewise, you have been such a beacon in my life and such a light. And so I just want to thank you for that. Thank you so much for listening. If this work resonates with you in any way, you can support it by leaving a review or comment or sharing it with friends. Also, you can sign up for the newsletter, Mind, Body, Spirit, Food. And by becoming a paid member for just $5 a month, you help fund this entire project. Thank you so much to all of you who are already subscribed, especially to those paid subscribers. This work could not happen without you. I'm Nikki Sizemore, and as always, remember to nourish yourself with intention and love.